Welcome, everyone, to Beers with Jesus, only on Todd's World.
Woo!
So, welcome to Todd's World. I'm Todd. Carrie's with me,
Hello.
and she's the governor of the 51st state of Todd's World.
Ooh,
It's
I'm a
impressive.
governor, a governess, a governor. I do feel like I'm a governess taking care of you. No, I'm really not.
Doing what you
Actually,
can.
I feel like you've been the caretaker lately. Happy belated birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
I
I
hope you had a great week.
I look great for 100. It's amazing.
Nah, you're only like halfway there.
I've been drinking baby's blood solid for like
Oh,
10
it's
years.
working. The fine lines are gone. The glow, the plump lips.
I'm dying.
Disgusting.
So, how you been, Carrie?
I've been doing well.
We
Good
missed you
week.
last week. They had to muddle through with me.
I know. How'd you do?
I don't know.
I only listened to part of it. I've worked all week, so I'm only heard part of it.
I got busy and I didn't get a chance to go back
Okay.
and
I'm
relive
sure I'm
it.
sure you managed
We
Todd's World
talked about
well without
Rahab,
me. Oh, okay.
the harlot, the sex
Oh.
worker.
Oh my gosh, you were left alone with that.
Yep.
Should have taken the week off.
It was good.
Wow.
But this week we're back in Mark.
Okay.
So
So I wanted to tell you I had to get an oil change yesterday, and this
that's
guy
exciting.
reached into the car and he had a tattooed sleeve. And as I looked, I could tell there was a little bit of a Christian imagery, but as I looked more closely, I realized that on his entire arm, he had illustrated many of Jesus's miracles.
Hmm.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, "Let me
That's
see this." And
interesting.
so you saw like his feet on the water. You saw him with the healing the blind man.
That's kind of
It was
cool.
super, it was so cool. It was really well done. It was beautiful. And I started talking to him and I said, "Hey, do you listen to podcasts?" Because it reminded me of the Gospel of Mark that we've been
Yeah.
reading. And he said, "Well," he said, I'd like to." He says, "I just haven't found one
He
that I'm
needs to
really
find Todd's World.
interested in." And I told him about Todd's World and Beers with Jesus. And he immediately pulled out his phone and put it in his notes to check us out. So
Well, welcome,
his name
oil
was
change guy.
Trent. Yeah, his name was
Oh,
Trent.
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 Trent, the tattooed oil change guy.
Yeah, I hope
That's tattoo sounds pretty cool, actually.
it was really
Sounds
beautiful.
pretty
Beautiful.
creative.
Well done. I'm missing it. There were several. And there was then at his wrist was like this giant like lion's head. It was beautiful. Anyway,
Wow.
super cool.
I don't have anything on me.
Lion and the lamb, you
I
know?
got
Well,
nothing.
yeah.
I got nothing.
You're like, if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do a sleeve of
All
all
my
that. Yeah.
scribbling's going into books, man.
Yeah, that's
Not on
fine. I
my.
think that works. That works for you. You're
Speaking
using
of
your
guys,
talents. Yes,
9 Mile
please.
Point is out, and it's amazing. It's my
Todd's
new
novel.
my new novel. Yeah, 9 Mile Point,
9 Mile
set in
Point.
Michigan of all places.
Hmm.
Look at that. What a great cover.
It's such a beautiful. So, do you get to
Look at
pick the
that
cover?
handsome guy.
Look at that.
Here's what it says on the
He looks
back.
like 35.
Yeah, it looks good for 100.
Hmm.
When Joel Parker falls in love with Camille Garrison as a teenager one summer in northern Michigan,
Northern
he
Michigan.
has
Love it.
no idea how far reaching that past. No, that love will prove. I can't even read.
Mm.
The font's like 28 point.
Oh my gosh.
He has no idea how far reaching that love will prove. Haunted by ghosts from a distant past, Camille leaves Joel for the life she was born to, but the connection between them will last longer than either can imagine. Years later, both have moved on with their lives, but when life finds them both once more in northern Michigan, the wheels of fate begin to turn, and the ghosts they thought they left behind almost 2 decades earlier are alive and well and stirring again. In
Sounds
this,
so good.
it's a real good mystery. In this supernatural mystery, the sins of the father stretch into the future, threatening
Ooh.
everything Joel and Camille hold dear. Can they find the answers waiting in the past before it's too late? I don't know.
Dun dun
It's
dun. No, it sounds so good.
a real good
It
book.
sounds really
Fast
good.
paced. It's not political at all. It's also not religious
Shocking.
or spiritual really at all. There's just
Okay.
not a lot of that in there.
That's interesting.
It's pretty mainstream, like just a really great like kind of there's a big mystery and some violence and some supernatural stuff and it's fun. Blood and gore. No, I don't know. That's just what
Oh no,
TikTok
not blood
says.
and gore.
Just what TikTok said.
Right? Yeah. Hey, you'll have to put an excerpt when you do the audio. You'll have to put an excerpt on TikTok and see if it's flagged for blood and gore.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be.
Yep.
So yeah, get on Amazon. All my books are only on Amazon just because, well, that's the easiest. and,
Absolutely. I know.
and so
It's the way to go.
Leaves the Blue Way, 9 Mile Point, both great reads.
Hmm.
Insurrection and Witness, great reads. So
Buy two and read one and then give one away.
I've got something new I'm working on too. This will be a shorter story, so this should be out
I love your short stories.
somewhat soon. We'll see how it goes. And of course, I'll put it on here on Todd's World.
Cool.
People get to hear it. The audio, the written printed thing will be at Substack. So
Nice.
hopefully it'll be fun. I'm hoping, we'll see. I'm hoping it could maybe lead to like a series of short stories with this particular
Fun.
character.
That's
Not
cool.
necessarily like back to back right in a row, but you know what I mean.
Hmm.
As you go on, just new entries here and there.
Nice.
Like I'm a modern day Hemingway. The Nick Adams stories.
I love it. It's no, I think it's great. You're always inspiring me, so
Yeah, did you write something?
I'm always writing something.
You got
I'm
your
always
haikus.
I was gonna say I'm always writing something. I know. We haven't done a challenge in a while. That's all right.
All right, you ready to
So,
get to it with beers?
sure.
This is Beers with Jesus, guys. What we do
I literally have a beer
is
today.
drink with Jesus.
We do. Because that's the
Jesus
kind
likes
of
to drink.
relationship we want to have. Did you hear? Hey, did you hear about this Lenten small group that my mom is in?
No.
Okay, so she's in the through her church. She's in a small group for Lent, special Lenten reflection thing each week.
Okay.
And in the book, one of the, I don't know if it was like a chapter or one of the questions posed is Jesus someone, like, do you have the kind of relationship? Is Jesus someone you would want to have a beer with?
Oh, you're right. She did tell me that. I
Did she
forgot about
tell
it.
you? Isn't that
I didn't put
great?
it together with the group thing. Like I
Yep.
didn't.
Isn't that
That's
funny?
it's really funny.
And I was like, we feel that way. That's why
Yeah,
we have beers with Jesus. So,
we love it.
yeah, it's fun.
It's
And
pretty
who
great.
doesn't want a day drink on a Saturday
Exactly. Hang out with
when
us. We don't
when we
preach. I
record?
do once in a while, like last week. Although
Did you,
questionable.
when you were left solo, were you preaching?
I don't think I preached. I
Did
kind
you
of
pound on the pulpit?
no.
Okay.
I think I was pretty chill. In fact, I get more worked up and preacherish during news when I do it on my own than
Yeah.
during beers.
Yeah,
Because
we
there was
definitely get it.
another whole Ukraine thing, and it makes me so mad. Like I can't start talking about it right now, or it'll make me mad.
Yeah. No, this is different. This is our time to just
But I don't
enjoy
feel
the
that way.
story.
Yeah, I enjoy the way. There are things about the passages sometimes that make me mad. Like at the end of this, when the soldiers start beating the shit out of Jesus, makes me mad. I don't,
Yeah.
you know what
I
I mean?
know. This is gonna be a little bit of a tough road.
But I'm not going to rant about it.
Right.
So we're in Mark
It's just
15. We've been
uncomfortable.
going through the book of Mark
Mm-hmm.
just to kind of exploring the story, enjoying the
Mm-hmm.
story along with you guys. So then we'll look at the characters,
Mm-hmm.
motivations, whatever. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of enjoy it. We are in the very first part of Mark 15, so it's standing before Pilate.
Okay.
And I think we're just going to hang there
We're gonna
today.
just do that section today.
Hmm
Okay.
I don't feel the need to throw the crucifixion on too.
Yeah. I
I
saw that
can
was
wait a
next
week.
and I was
I
like,
can wait a week.
can we prep? Yeah, can we wait? Okay. So,
But this is good. And then we may
yeah.
actually hit the other two synoptic gospels because
Mm-hmm.
there's not only some details that are brought into the story, there's entire characters that aren't introduced in Mark that are in Matthew and Luke.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So that's kind of interesting.
I
But we'll,
like it
we'll
when you
work
do
through
that.
Mark first and kind of see where
Okay.
we get. Do you want to read it since you weren't here last week?
Sure. I'll read this first part and then I know you're going to introduce some other
Yeah, then I can just blow through some
excerpts.
of the others, but we won't do it back to back. You can just read
Okay.
this section and then we'll kind of chat about it.
All right. Sorry. The pollen's bad, so I'm a little sorry.
Okay.
Hopefully I sound all right.
I didn't think it was that kind of a show.
It's
Oh no.
who knew? You get everything here. You just get a little bit of everything. All right. Chapter 15, Standing Before Pilate. At dawn's first light, the high priests, with the religious leaders and scholars, arranged a conference with the entire Jewish council. After tying Jesus securely, they took him out and presented him to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you king of the Jews?" He answered, "If you say so." The high priest let loose a barrage of accusations. Pilate asked again, "Aren't you going to answer anything? That's quite a list of accusations." Still, he said nothing. Pilate was impressed, really impressed. It was a custom at the feast to release a prisoner, anyone the people asked for. There was one prisoner called Barabbas, locked up with the insurrectionists who had committed murder during the uprising against Rome. As the crowd came up and began to present its petition for him to release a prisoner, Pilate anticipated them. "Do you want me to release the King of the Jews to you?" Pilate knew by this time that it was through sheer spite that the high priest had turned Jesus over to him. But the high priest by then had worked up the crowd to ask for the release of Barabbas. Pilate came back. "So what do I do with this man you call King of the Jews?" They yelled, "Nail him to a cross." Pilate objected. But for what crime? But they yelled all the louder, "Nail him to a cross." Pilate gave the crowd what it wanted, set Barabbas free, and turned Jesus over for whipping and crucifixion. The soldiers took Jesus into the palace called Praetorium and called together the entire brigade. They dressed him up in purple and put a crown plaited from a thorn bush on his head. Then they began their mockery. "Bravo, King of the Jews." They banged on his head with a club, spit on him, and knelt down in mock worship. After they had had their fun, they took off the purple cape and put his own clothes back on him. Then they marched out to nail him to the cross.
Hmm.
Ugh.
See that last part? That pisses me off. I
Yeah, it
don't like
pisses me
it.
off too.
I wouldn't like it to any. I wouldn't like it with any innocent person, even
Mm-mm.
non-innocent person. I mean, it's just
I know. Well, and just the unjustness of the fact that
assholes.
it was so manipulated. Yeah,
Just
it
makes
was
me mad.
it was so manipulated. Like the whole scene was manipulated, and Pilate knew it, and he was trying to. I remember when I was really little thinking that Pilate was the one responsible because he
Yeah.
was he was the front man. But as you get older and you read this, you realize it isn't. He saw what was going on, and
Hmm.
he just was the one who had to.
But he capitulated.
Yeah.
I think that's the. You know what I think is interesting?
Mm.
First of all, the after tying Jesus securely again, assholes, just
Right.
stupid. All it is,
Mhm.
all that is performance art.
Right. Like
It's
he's given himself over
it's
peacefully.
it's like the people that got so excited about Donald Trump's mugshot. All that is performance art. It really is.
Hmm.
It's not for anything other than they've decided that this person who's been everywhere, a public figure everybody knows
Yeah.
and respected, and a week ago is riding into Jerusalem to hosannas and everything else.
Right.
And now he's so dangerous. They had to go after him, remember, in the middle of the night with clubs and swords.
Right.
And it's just,
Yeah.
this is, when I say it's performance art, that's all it is on the
Hmm.
part of the high priest and the Pharisees and the whole thing. They're just trying to make Jesus appear to be something that a criminal. And so
Hmm.
they want Pilate to think, oh, this guy's real dangerous. Look at him. We had to tie
Right.
him up
We
or
had
else
to
he
tie
might have
him up.
attacked you.
Oh my
He's like
gosh.
a rabid pit bull.
And
What are
listen
you
to the
talking
crowd. They're,
about?
the crowd agrees with us. Yeah. It's terrible.
So, I mean, that's just right out of the right out of the gate. But then, you know what I think is interesting
Hmm.
is that when it says is that first exchange, that first initial exchange between Pilate and Jesus.
Hmm.
So the Jews have, or the high priest, whatever, they've kind of all they bound him tightly and they've already beat on him some, and this guy's real bad, and they've got their whole litany of accusations and the whole thing, right? We got to put this
Hmm.
guy to death. He's so
Right.
bad. And so Pilate says to him, because one of their main accusations is that he's trying to invoke an insurrection
Hmm.
against Rome. That's the one. I mean, because Rome had laws. It wasn't like they just killed whoever they wanted whenever they wanted. Like,
Yeah.
and one of the things that you could get the death penalty for was treason or insurrection. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so that's why they tried to paint him as having claimed to be king of the Jews, because then that's a reason for Rome to put him to death. But so they
Okay,
fabricated
wait.
this idea.
Okay, just because of the king title?
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So that because there's no king but Caesar.
Got it. So
And
it's almost like, in an earthly way, it's almost blasphemous
right.
to declare yourself king of anything. Okay.
Yeah. And
Got it.
so that's what they're hanging their hat on, as far as how can we get Pilate to how can we get the Roman governor Pilate to
Hmm.
allow us to kill Jesus.
Okay.
And so their made up story is that he's an insurrectionist.
Got it.
It kind of makes you think when you look back over the last 4 years that there's nothing new in the world, right? I mean, seems like stories repeat.
Yes, there are some parallels. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, no, I,
But
I see what you're saying though.
but that initial exchange,
Hmm.
Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?"
Hmm.
And he answers, and this is the only time that Jesus answers the high priest, Pilate, Herod, who's another one we don't see. We'll catch him in Luke. But
Okay.
Herod actually is a character in this too. Mark doesn't talk about him. But
Right.
but
Is it before Pilate? I know we'll get there, but
no,
I'm,
Pilate
oh,
sends him to Herod, then Herod sends him
Herod.
back to
Okay.
Pilate.
Okay.
But the the only answer that at least it's recorded, because it constantly says that he didn't answer a word to
Hmm.
any of these accusations, to anything, but the one thing he answered is when Pilate said, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus' answer was, "If you say so." And I thought, that question is the question that all of our lives, all of our realities, all of our eternal destinies hinge on. And
Hmm.
it's asked every one of us asks the same thing, and it's, are you the king of the, are you who you claim to be? And Jesus' answer is, if you say so. So it depends on what we say to that answer. Our answer is what's going to
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 decide.
decide for us. Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Interesting.
it's pretty kind of heavy stuff. It's like, well, that's up to you. I will be the king of your life. I will be your savior.
Hmm.
I will rescue and redeem you, but you have to choose it.
Yep.
So, what do you say? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the
That's
only thing that
interesting.
Jesus responded to in this entire barrage, this entire accusation, all of it. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? The only thing he says is that, and to me, I think that's significant. What do you think?
I obviously I like this. I hate the context of this, but I like the spin of that. The I'm going to say spin is the wrong word. I like the connection of that moment to every potential moment with every one of us.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting.
Well, I think that this whole story, this part of it specifically,
Hmm.
but in general, all of it, it 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 pretty much works that way. So, like when you're watching the crowd's reaction, when you're watching the high priest reaction, all these things,
Hmm.
it's it's all about God has entered the world. He's become one of us.
Hmm.
How are we going to respond? Well, we're going to respond in different ways, but they're all going to be like the people responded back then. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Right.
the responses are all, you only have so many options. And the world's going to respond by nailing them to a cross. And
Right.
that's kind of our options. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I just thought that was good.
Yeah.
Like in the end, what do you say? In the end, who do you say Jesus is?
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right. Like for yourself.
Yeah, that's what matters.
Well, and for him. And what's so great about that is it's every individual's choice, every individual's personal relationship with Jesus. It's not about, I mean, he's here to save everyone, but everyone has to decide it individually
And also,
for themselves.
it, if you go to the First Baptist Church down the road on Main Street, it
Hmm.
doesn't matter. It's not just them. If you go to the
Yeah.
Catholic Church, if you go wherever, it doesn't matter really what your church says. What really is going to matter in all of this is who do you say Jesus is? I'm
Right.
not saying that they can't help you and that you can't confess the things of the church
Sure.
and whatever, but my
Hmm.
point is they can't speak for you.
Hmm.
Like, just, you can't be, you're not born into this. You understand?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
This
Yeah,
is going to be a
exactly.
personal decision on your part. Who do
Hmm.
you say Jesus is? You
And
know?
the leader of your church has no bearing on that.
Well, not for you. He might for him, but not for you.
Right, for him,
Yeah.
but for you and for me and for anyone listening, it's completely up to you.
Jesus came to bring his kingdom, and his kingdom was
Hmm.
going to be in born in people, born into their heart. They're born again into this kingdom, and it's person by person, by individual by
Hmm.
individual by individual.
Right.
And I don't know. I thought that was significant. I thought it was good. Um, what else do you think? What else you
Well,
notice about Pilate? That's kind of what I
yeah.
thought. What I'm kind of doing is I kind of looked at the characters. So
Okay.
like in Mark, I listed the characters. I mean, of course, you got Jesus. He's the center in all of
Hmm.
them. But in Mark, you've got Pilate, you got the high priest, the crowd, and Barabbas. Those are kind of your main kind of characters.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
they're all playing different roles. You know what I mean? It's kind of
Yes.
interesting.
I mean, I kind of already said what I've noticed about Pilate, and that is that he knows this is a manipulation on the parts of the religious scholars and the high priests. Um, I mean, he even objects. So I'm glad he at least objects to the crowd.
Do you think there's value in that?
Do I think there's value in him
Yeah.
objecting? 100%.
Do you
He's like,
think
what
in
crime? He's saying, like, give me a reason. Like, I'm not just because the crowd is shouting this, I'm not just going to bow down and convict someone or, release someone who's guilty or conversely, convict someone who's innocent. And so he objects, but the crowd's just worked up.
does
They've got their mouth
Pilate's
again.
knowledge and understanding of the truth, which is kind of what you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you're
Hmm.
saying he can see through this, right? He
Seems like
sees,
it.
I think so too. I agree
Yeah.
with you.
Hmm.
But does that knowledge, does that seeing through, does that justify him at all? Or does it actually further condemn him in
Ah,
the
well,
story? Do you know what I mean?
well, I feel like he kind of gave it a try. I don't think he tried enough, but then you can argue that this was the prophecy and was Jesus's whole purpose. But are you asking if I think,
Well, like here it is in
yeah,
Matthew 27. It says,
okay.
it's a little more detailed. It says, when Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere with the crowd
Hmm.
and that a riot was imminent, he took a basin of water and washed his hands
Hmm.
in full sight of the crowd, saying, I'm washing my hands of responsibility for this man's death.
Hmm.
From now on, it's in your hands. You're the judge and jury. And the crowd, this other main character, kind
Yeah.
of a collective character, the crowd answered, we'll take the blame. We and our children after us. And it's the crowd that's chanting, and when Pilate asked him, what do you want me to do with him? Nail him to a cross.
Hmm.
And then the crowd not only wants to kill him, but they're willing to take full responsibility, not only on themselves, but
Hmm.
on all of their children, every generation to come after them for
Yep.
what they're doing right now. That's how it reads.
Hmm.
So, do you think, what I'm wondering is, do you think that Pilate's washing of his hands, his symbolic washing of his hands, do you think that do you think God looks at that and that he gets some credit? God's like, well, Pilate washed his hands of it. All of the guilt is on is on the Jews, and all the Jews to come after. I don't know,
Right.
but
I don't
but
know.
do you think it worked? I guess is what I'm saying. Do you know what
Well,
I mean?
no, I don't think you can just it was a weak. It was I don't want any part of this because I don't agree with it, but it was weak because he basically
It
walked
was
away.
weakness because he capitulated to the crowd.
Yeah. I mean, it was his way of demonstrating his disagreement, but he didn't do anything to stop what was happening.
Let me ask you
He
this:
tried to absolve himself, you know.
for anybody who doesn't realize, we also have the Wildly Opinionated News Hour. So
Okay.
we do that show that we drop on Tuesdays, and we do this show that we drop on Wednesdays every week.
Hmm.
And you should listen to both. So if you haven't listened to that after you're done with this, go back and you should listen to both every week. They're really, I don't think it's any excuse not to. So, um,
We are
but
wildly opinionated
but what
and wildly entertaining.
I'm not going to get back into news. But what I'm
Okay.
about to say will find some bearing in a long conversation we had about Israel in Wildly Opinionated News Hour.
Okay.
Do you think there's a sense when I read and this is percolating because of the Rogan interview, because of a lot of things that are percolating out there that I'm
Okay.
not going to get into right now, but that's why I'm referencing that.
Okay.
Do you think there's a sense in which the Jews and the crowd, by taking that responsibility on themselves and their citizens,
Hmm.
have borne, have reaped what they've sown throughout history because they took the death of the only Savior on themselves and their children? Do you think it was like a vow that God said, okay, you have it? Because it does seem like the Jews have been somewhat put upon throughout
Right.
history since then.
Okay.
Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It makes sense what you're
Not from an
saying.
anti-Semitic standpoint. I'm
No, I
just saying,
understand.
did they get exactly what they asked for?
Right. So, I mean, you could argue that, you know, if you're speaking so broadly. However, if we're going to break this down realistically, whoever said that will take responsibility and our children, our children's children, all that. I mean, that wasn't the crowd. That's what, one or two people
Right.
who just happened to voice that, and that's what was recorded.
It does seem to be a statement that if you have a general familiarity with all of the Old Testament and with
Mm-hmm.
all of
Mm-hmm.
Jewish and Israel history,
Mm-hmm.
it would seem to be the culmination of a middle finger that the Jews gave to God over and over and over and over again, to the point that
Mm.
when God finally sends a Savior to them,
Mm-hmm.
that he stands over top. This is when he comes into Jerusalem after they've been cheering him, and he's
Right.
weeping over Jerusalem because of all the prophets that he sends constantly, and they constantly reject him, and they're about to make the final rejection. See, in a lot of when I grew up in church, and this may be appropriate. I'm just asking the questions. God
Mm-hmm.
forbid we ask any questions. But it was always presented like, and I again think this is a little bit of that shine away. Everybody's scared of being called an anti-Semite. Like
Right.
that's a
Yep.
fear that goes through everybody.
Yes. It's a
And
tough spot.
so in the Baptist church, they were always quick to point out this isn't about the Jews. This is all of us. We all put Jesus on that cross.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's a point to that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But then maybe there's a point to the fact that Jesus wept over Jerusalem, that God spent all this time on this particular group of people and was constantly
Mm-hmm.
rejected, and then they finally rejected him, and to this day they reject him. I mean,
It's interesting.
more vehemently than anybody else is the Jewish rejection of Christ.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Well,
Kind of
I'm gonna
interesting.
it is interesting. I'm gonna try to find the spot here. Um, so according to this, it says, but the high priests by then had worked up the crowd to ask for the release of Barabbas. So they also have been like they've probably been lied to that.
Manipulated.
Yes, manipulated and
Hmm.
lied to that day. So, you know, even now, if we make decisions in our lives based on lies being told to us by either the media or anyone, someone raising us, you know, you're brainwashed, whatever it is. I'm just saying, it's not that you're not responsible, but I feel like God would have compassion on, you know, on a group that is operating under
Well,
false
I guess my
pretenses.
point is here, based on
Mm-hmm.
Jesus' initial interchange with Pilate,
Mm-hmm.
is that
Yes.
it doesn't matter if God will have compassion on anybody, they
Yeah.
won't allow themselves to be had compassion on.
Okay.
And in the end,
Yeah,
that's the lost. Now it can be
sure.
said that culturally it certainly seems to be the Jews that hate Jesus the most
Well, and okay, and
and
I was gonna
have
say,
ever since he came.
have they gotten what they've asked for? I don't even feel like God is doing that. I feel like their decision is to reject
If you
the
turn your back on
salvation.
reality,
Yeah, I
then
mean
to some extent
salvation.
you've set yourself outside of reality
I
and you
mean, just
reap
you've
what you
set yourself
sow.
outside of salvation.
Yeah.
It's what, based on their beliefs, they don't believe he's the savior, and it's like, okay. I
Yeah.
mean, an awful lot of people do
Yeah.
believe he is.
Well, a lot, I mean, it was Jews at the beginning that were
Hmm.
the disciples. The church was Jewish at the very front
Right.
end. You know what
I
I mean? It
know.
was thousands of Jews that turned
Yeah.
to Christ.
Hmm.
So it's clearly not like Jews can't be saved, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
All of the
It's not
apostles are
on the
Jews.
whole. Like, right. God didn't draw a line in the sand and say all Jews are condemned.
Jesus is a
It's
Jew. Still, right now.
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
So the choice is there, but this group as a whole in this moment are manipulated. So,
and I think Paul makes a point somewhere. I think it might be in Romans that
okay.
he makes room for a future kind of revival that might take place amongst the Jews. Now that's
Okay.
taken into dispensational craziness these days, but
Oh, okay.
there certainly it's there, and there is some. So who knows what it means? But it does sound like at some point there could be a, or maybe it already. Maybe that's just the church age, and that was what you saw in the early church. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what, but it's an interesting idea. I thought
Right.
this juxtaposition, because the other thing in Matthew 27, the other character that's introduced is Pilate's wife.
Oh, yes, because he goes to her, doesn't he?
Well, no, it says while court, well, kind of. She sends him a message while
Okay.
court was still in session. So Jesus is in front of Pilate. Still, he's questioning whatever. Pilate's wife sent him a message.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get mixed up in judging this noble man. I've
Mm-hmm.
just been through a long and troubled night because of a dream about him.
Yep.
So not only does it seem like Pilate knows anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
But his wife clearly knows. And his wife is telling him, don't get involved. I know that it's the prophecy and it's going to be what it is, but
Right.
there's just,
You're just exploring this like prophecy aside.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Right. Well, maybe her message is what gave him pause.
and he just didn't have the strength
I guess
to
not.
see it through.
I mean, how many people are we talking?
I don't know.
I'm picturing, you know, from movie depictions, I'm picturing a lot of people.
Well, I mean, if you think about it,
Hmm.
400 or 500 people with no guns that are walking peacefully through velvet ropes tried to overthrow the United States. So, I mean, it doesn't take that many. They don't even have to have weapons. We almost lost the country.
Oh my gosh. I know. It was the
A
end of the
little
world.
wildly opinionated.
So, so Pilate, I was going to say, Pilate's standing there. He might have had a couple people to protect him, but it's like if it's an entire mob,
Yeah.
and he wasn't brave enough to say, I'm not going to do it.
Well,
You're
there's
like,
no
you
doubt
all,
that
you all need to check yourselves. I'm not doing
there's
this.
no doubt that Pilate most certainly had the manpower and the soldiers at his discretion to
Hmm.
put this down pretty easily. But he didn't want to for some reason. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It wasn't politically, there wasn't enough in it for him
Right.
to fight with the Jews over this carpenter that he didn't know anything about.
Okay. So,
He might
so
be innocent,
Todd,
but he's just a Jewish carpenter who claimed to be the Messiah. What's
okay,
Pilate
that's
care? What's
that's what
Rome
I was going
care?
to ask. Do you think did Pilate not know how consequential? Okay. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to ask a dumb question. Everyone there didn't truly know how consequential this man was. But
Right.
in the moment, there were people who believed Jesus was important.
Certainly, you get the feeling
Was it
that
lost
Pilate,
on Pilate? Did
it
he just
seems
have
like
no clue?
Pilate's confrontation with Christ,
Uh-huh.
it seems like that, it seems like it shook him a little. You know what I mean?
Pilate? Yeah.
Yeah, like when it says,
Yeah, I don't
where
think
is
he
it?
wants this on him. And I think that's why I think he washes his hands and does that to try to make himself feel a little bit better.
Because after that initial exchange, I think when Jesus said the one thing he said, which is if you say so, I think I said that's the question to all of us.
Hmm.
But in that moment, the creator and savior of the entire world
Hmm.
is in a personal exchange with Pilate,
Hmm.
and that's the question right then. It's like the all of the cosmic everything kind of comes down, and it's still Pilate who has to make the choice.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And
And
he
he
doesn't
makes right. He
and he
turns
doesn't
away.
like it.
But there is something about him that's really. I mean, we saw this in Herod too with John the Baptist. That Pilate says, "Aren't you going to answer anything?" Because after that, all these accusations keep coming, and that's the only
Yeah.
thing Jesus says. And he says that's quite a list of accusations. Still, Jesus said nothing. Pilate was impressed, really impressed. Like, there's something about Jesus that
Hmm.
really made a mark on Pilate. Like, he didn't miss it. He made the wrong choice in the end, and he capitulated to the crowd.
Hmm.
But I think he knew. I think he saw in Jesus. He knew the same thing his wife knew. My
Hmm.
guess is that as that crucifixion happened, that Pilate and his wife, who knows what happened after that? But I think they knew. And I think as things, all these stories start to ramp up about a resurrection, and then the high priests are coming to him later and like, we got to seal the tomb and we got to do this and we got to do that. I think he knew I screwed up. I know.
Right.
I
I
don't
think
know
he's like,
if
oh
that
crap.
ever constituted repentance. You can get to that point and not necessarily repent. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Right. I'm curious, does Pilate what's this translation? So we're reading from the Message, Todd's favorite
Well, that's the
translation of the
best. That's
Bible.
why.
He says it's the best. I'm curious about this Pilate being impressed. I'm curious how that translates in other
I happen to have
Bibles.
my big ass NIV study
Oh,
Bible
there you
right
go.
here.
I'm
Cultural
curious
background study Bible.
because
You
I'm
want to
yeah.
see how the NIV renders Mark 15.
Yes, I'm curious because I'm wondering, okay, if Pilate was impressed in that moment, what is he impressed by? That Jesus isn't just like begging, denying things, the fact that he's convicted, the fact that he's
The NIV says,
standing.
but
Mhm.
Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed.
Okay. Okay. So why is he impressed or amazed? Because Jesus is not denying everything, that he's just like, well, I'm not going to deny who I am. I'm not going to argue against like he's I'm just trying to I'm not articulating
Maybe,
it well.
maybe, maybe,
What's impressing
maybe
him?
he's, well, there's something about Jesus that just impresses him, but there's something in his silence. There's
Hmm.
something in Jesus not answering
Hmm.
that amazes and impresses Pilate. That
It's kind of like I'm not going to dignify these
everybody,
accusations with a response. I'm just going to stand here and take it.
yeah, I think it's that. I think it's
And
the
there's a strength in
standing there
it.
and taking it, the sacrificial kind of
Hmm.
suffering
Okay.
that's unjust. Like I think
Right.
maybe because Pilate knew from his
Yeah.
interchange with Jesus, from his wife's letter, from everything, Pilate knows Jesus is innocent. So he washes his hands later on.
Right.
And I think because he knows he's innocent, he can't fathom why he isn't declaring his own innocence.
Yeah. Not
It
like,
doesn't
listen,
make any sense to
let
him.
me answer all these accusations.
From
This
a
is
human
untrue.
perspective, it doesn't make any sense. Why isn't he
Right.
answering anybody?
I wonder.
Why doesn't he have anything to say for himself?
Hmm.
And that you can see Pilate's amazement a little bit at that.
Hmm.
And I think,
Well, especially, I mean, how many criminals, I'm going to say accused, how many accused stand there before him and behave that way? Probably none.
and Pilate's probably thinking, I want to let you go. Just give me something.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I'm sure.
Like anything. Just,
Right.
you're giving me nothing to work with.
Yeah.
You know, and I really think there's
Mm-hmm.
part of that. Like,
Yep.
all he's got is the crowd and the high priest. And the one thing Jesus says to him is, I mean, it's a seismic moment between those two, but it's
Mm-hmm.
personal. And it doesn't, you know, it's a lot to come to terms with in a second like that. Do you know what I mean? To be fair,
Yeah.
it's interesting to think of where Pilate went later on in his life. I don't know. I'm sure there's, I mean,
Yeah.
if it ever did this, what impact did this? Did it have an impact? As he watched, how long did he live? Did he live long enough to begin to see this
Mm-hmm.
Church of the Christian Way actually start to grow into something? You know what I mean? That
Mm-hmm.
started to kind of shake Rome a little during
Yeah.
Nero and everything else. So,
Yeah. I wonder if there's any like I know people have had fun like speculating about Pilate afterwards and the
needs
remember
Todd
that?
needs me to write about him, I think.
Yeah, there you go. There's some inspiration. I'm thinking of that there's a great movie that came out where Pilate dispatches one of his soldiers to find the body. He's like, we've got to find the body. Otherwise,
Oh, really?
yeah, yeah, it's so good.
I
And
don't even know what that movie is. I don't
oh
think I ever
yeah,
heard of it.
Joseph Fiennes plays the soldier, the Roman soldier who goes looking for the body
Huh.
because because they acknowledge that Jesus said he was going to um, rise
Rise
from the
from the
dead in
Dead.
3 days.
Yeah.
If he's gone, like we're in trouble. Like his prophecy will be a threat to the system.
Yeah.
But and now that I say it, I'm not sure if it's Pilate or someone else who dispatches him. But
I don't know.
yeah, he goes in search, in search
Huh.
of.
That sounds like a
It's
decent
so
movie.
good.
I never heard of it.
It's really good. I'll find it. It might be called Risen.
Hmm.
I'll look it up. But Joseph Fiennes plays the
Joseph
yeah,
Fiennes.
really
Well,
good.
I'm trying to think of who. I think was he the guy in Schindler's List?
His brother.
Ralph.
Yep, Rafe.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mixing them
Yep,
up.
he's the younger brother, I think.
Okay.
So I know people have speculated, but I wonder if there's any historical documentation about Pilate after this.
I don't know.
Um, I don't
Probably.
know.
Have
Probably.
to get a different podcast for that. You're not getting it on this one.
Nope.
That's too
We'll
much
be.
research,
I was
folks.
gonna say we'll get to the end of this. We'll get to the end of this book, this gospel by next Easter if we start digging that deep. Well,
So
so
we
yeah.
dealt with Pilate's wife. We dealt with Pilate washing his hands. Herod. That's in Luke.
Oh, yeah, yeah. In Luke. Okay.
Let's look at that just for a second because that's kind of interesting. Luke, what?
I'm
I
glad
wrote
you
it
brought that
down.
up because I was thinking, I felt like there was more to this process than what we just read. And that's what I remember. Pilate
Yes.
sends him to Herod,
Mm-hmm.
which is what you're going to share. And it's in Luke.
Luke 23. So I'm
You
going to
know,
start it.
Mark just liked to be brief. He just,
Mm-hmm. Peter just got things down.
to the point.
Peter had no literary flair for the. He's got all the points out. The truth was right there.
Yep.
Boom. He
Yep.
didn't need all the fluff.
It's like, we don't need to hear about Pilate's wife.
It,
Whatever.
I think, in a way, I enjoy it because it's kind of part of
Hmm.
the charm of Mark. But it is nice
Yeah.
to come back in, especially when you've
Yeah.
got more characters
Hmm.
that are introduced. So in Luke 23, when
Hmm.
Pilate heard that, he asked, so he's a Galilean? Realizing that he properly came under Herod's jurisdiction, he passed the buck to Herod, who just happened to be in Jerusalem for a few days.
Oh my gosh. Pilate must have been like, thank God.
So what's interesting about this is that clearly this took some time in between. You know what I mean? It wasn't like a kind of split thing. So what's
Hmm.
interesting about that is that crowd, I'm not sure that the crowds were always the same. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
Hmm.
Because I think time would have
Coming
taken,
and
you'd have,
going.
yeah.
Okay.
Herod was delighted when Jesus showed up. He had wanted for a long time to see him. He'd heard so much about him,
Interesting.
just like he was with John the Baptist, you know? He was the same. He's like fascinated. He hoped to see him do something spectacular. That's
Oh.
how Herod was.
Herod's like, show me something.
He peppered him with questions. Jesus didn't answer, not one word.
Mm.
But the high priest and religion scholars were right there, saying their piece, strident and shrill in their accusations. Mightily offended. This is Herod. Oh, he's so offended.
I can
Might,
imagine someone in his position being offended by, yeah.
mightily offended. Herod turned on Jesus. His
Mhm.
soldiers joined in, taunting and jeering. They dressed him up in an elaborate king costume and sent him back to Pilate. That
Mm.
day, Herod and Pilate became thick as thieves. Always before, they had kept their distance. That's kind of interesting, right? A little wrinkle to the story.
Very. So, how,
It's
well,
it's
you
funny to
you
me
you
Herod's,
discuss Herod first, yeah.
well, it's just his like his fascination. And you know, there's people that are like that. There's people I think that are fascinated by Jesus
Hmm.
that never know Jesus. In fact, never
Right.
get to know Jesus, can't get in some ways past their own fascination
Hmm.
because if Jesus doesn't do something spectacular, then they walk away disappointed. They're like, or even worse, offended. Like,
Offended.
I thought you were going to heal me. You know what I
Okay.
mean? If you're not going to heal me, screw you.
Right.
They look at God as a performance, like somebody to entertain them. That's kind of how Herod, I think, looked at Jesus.
Right. So,
Somebody to banter. He wants somebody to banter back and forth with. I think John did that a little bit with him when he was in prison. You get that idea that he would go down and he'd talk to John and he'd be so offended, but he was
okay.
like addicted to going down and being offended. And
Oh
he'd
my
keep
gosh.
going down talking to John, which makes it even weirder that scene where he just all of a sudden cuts his head off because of his stepdaughter dancing for him or
Oh,
whatever.
that's right. She's the one who asked.
Because
The mom convinced the daughter to ask for
Herod, I
John's
think
head.
it wasn't a normal prisoner. Like Herod had spent a lot of time with John the Baptist. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so whatever
Oh,
it is in
okay.
Herod, there's a fascination with things spiritual. There's a fascination with the
Yes.
supernatural
Hmm.
that doesn't translate to saving repentance. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. So okay, this is King Herod,
King
correct?
Herod, yeah.
Okay, so I just was looking him up to make sure like we're talking about the same King Herod, king of Judea, according to a very
Yes.
quick search. Is that accurate? So I think a king,
Probably the son of the king that tried to kill Jesus when he was a baby.
okay.
I think they're two different Herods. I think this is Herod Antipas or something. I don't know.
Okay, gotcha. Could
But
be. Okay.
remember that story about Herod, the wise men went to Herod
Right.
and then
I was thinking it was the same
an
person,
angel
but you think
appears
it's
to
maybe a descendant?
I think it's a son.
Okay.
Because you got to realize there'd be what 33 years between there.
True.
So that would be a long reign, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how long they lived, but so okay, so here's the thing. A king at that time, he's king over all of these people.
Yeah. Well, king under Rome, we got to remember that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But I mean, but he's a
he has
ruler,
responsibility, yeah.
yes, in his own respect. And I think that maybe the fascination comes in when it's like probably not in touch. He's not out among the people.
Right.
So the buzz about John the Baptist, the buzz about Jesus, you know, gets to the king. And I'm sure they're fascinated because this is something that's like influencing the people
Yeah.
under him. So they're probably like, hey, like that's probably this curiosity. What's the buzz? What's the big deal about this person?
Yeah.
I think you've touched on something with the spirituality for sure. And if it's a fascination with the spiritual, let's say, powers of people like that, like John the Baptist and Jesus, it has to be it has to be something maybe they're a little conflicted about. Like they want to know about it, but they also, I think in their own minds, are the most powerful. They're it's all their life is about being in this position of power. So when they think about something that is supernaturally powerful, spiritually powerful, it has to be like they're curious about it, also sort of threatened about it, kind of want to know about it, but They don't want to be overpowered by it.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of like this little curiosity dance that they do because they're not regular people.
Well, that's
Herod is
true.
not a regular person. If he's a king at that time, he probably
Right.
never goes outside. He probably has like a courtyard.
I've never
I
been
mean,
outside. He doesn't even
well,
know
he
there's
like
a
out.
sun.
Well, I was just saying, like if he goes outside, but he doesn't walk around. He doesn't go out to lunch. He's in his
Right.
palace. He's got a courtyard with a garden. I mean, this is it. It's his life.
I gotcha.
So I just
Do you
think
think
that
that there are people, can you think of like um analogies to
okay,
like modern day type of people who are
okay,
fascinated with
ah,
aspects of spirituality,
hmm
but that doesn't seem to lead them to Jesus? Do you know what I
oh,
mean?
sure. Well, I think the fascination is with a darker a
With the
darker
occult?
influence, the occult. That
Yeah.
would be my analogy today.
That's
And I'm
probably
not
where
saying that that's
that
this
leads people, that particular
probably.
thing we're talking about
hmm
eventually.
hmm Yeah, because today the concept of Jesus is it's ordinary, it's mainstream. So someone who's curious about something that's maybe lesser known is going to find darker forces
Yeah.
because they're going to probably be anti-Christian for various reasons because of the way they live, because of their
Yeah.
personal culture. I'm trying not to be political, but like, famous people and influenced by a whole different kind of lifestyle and they're looking for something, you know, spectacular. They want to see something spectacular.
Yeah.
And they aren't amazed by a miracle that happens in a church, for
Yeah.
example. So they want to see something different. And I think that leads to something darker.
Well, it's interesting to think about the motivations that lie behind that. You know what I
hmm
mean?
Right.
It's like what are they where's the error? What are they after? Like
Ah,
C.S. Lewis talks about how and I'm going to butcher this a little, but it's kind of he makes a point about science and magic. And
okay.
he says that make no mistake, science and magic were twins. He says the one was weak and died, and the other was strong and it thrived, whatever.
Thrived, I
I'm
think.
not sure which it is.
I think it's
And
thrived. Let's say thrived. Okay.
there you go.
It
Thronged.
survived.
But but his point is they both tried to do what they tried to do was they looked at wisdom and how they could manipulate nature
Ah, okay.
rather than the older wisdom, which was how do we conform man to the great laws, to nature, and to whatever. It
hmm
was with science and with magic, how do we bend it to our will?
Okay.
And so science succeeded where magic failed.
hmm
But the point of that is that kind of what Herod or what people like Herod find appealing in Christ is this idea of magical powers that they can
Yes.
manipulate to their own thing, and that isn't God. God isn't some carnival barker. You know what
Right.
I
Todd,
mean?
I'm so glad you circled back to this because I accidentally led us away from a really important point that you were making, and that is that Herod's fascination with Jesus, whatever aspects of him he was interested in, did not bring him closer to Jesus's function here, his purpose. Didn't bring Herod closer to an
Right.
understanding of being saved.
It kind of makes me wonder if there was something similar
hmm
going on. Maybe not exactly the same, but something similar going on. Remember when Jesus went back to Nazareth
hmm
and he'd been doing all these miracles all
Oh
over
yeah, when he went
Galilee and
back
all over,
like
and
back
then he goes
home.
back to his hometown
hmm
and he couldn't really do anything. Remember? It doesn't say that he wouldn't. It says that
Right.
he couldn't do many miracles because of their lack of faith.
Oh right, because everyone was just like, this is just Jesus who we've known. Like,
Yeah, and I wonder if
what
what
is
they
this
were
about?
looking for from him was the same kind of thing, like just show us some tricks then. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And that's not
More
how miracles work. Jesus isn't just like
more like a
throwing out
carnival
party
act.
tricks.
hmm
He's meeting people in need where they're at and he's rescuing them. the miracle is taking place fat is like in an instant what
Hmm.
God will accomplish in all of the redeemed eventually, right? Which is
Yeah.
healing, which is whatever. But Jesus is just fast forwarding it, and he's doing it right
Hmm.
then. He's showing us that healing power of God. But he's meeting people who are desperate. It's blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are they
Hmm.
that mourn. Blessed, you know what I mean? You look at all these things, and that's Jesus is meeting people at their needs.
But it
Herod doesn't
makes
have
me,
any needs.
oh, yeah, true.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes. But it
They
makes
aren't
me
coming to him
sad.
out of need.
But it makes me sad, like those people and anyone else, even Herod. It makes me sad that there couldn't have been someone like I know that Jesus doesn't have to perform, like, isn't performing tricks to convert people. But it's like, wasn't there anyone in need nearby that he could have helped, who he could have helped and then been witnessed by someone who maybe needed, I don't know. But again, I
I
guess
don't think
if,
they'd see it.
no, I know, I was going to say if their faith is weak.
I
So,
think they're blinded.
uh,
You know what I mean? There's
it
multiple
makes,
times in the
well,
Old Testament where the prophets talk about, or God speaking through the prophets talks about the blind and the deaf in his people. And like they're blinding themselves and they're stuffing cotton in their ears and they will not see and they will not hear him. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But that doesn't mean they don't want to see a good show once in a while. I guess that's my point. You know what I mean?
Right. But and that isn't, and Jesus isn't going to do that. And he won't do it for
That isn't
Herod.
God isn't going to do that. God never
Nope.
has. He's never responded in that way. We have
Right.
to come to him out of our need. We have to approach Christ or Christ has to meet us at a point of desperation,
Hmm.
I think.
Okay, so let's bring this to today. Well, we can't just say, "Hey God, I need a sign from you. I'm just doubting everything. I need a sign from you." We're not going to get a sign. However, there have been times you and I am
I think
sure have,
asked in the right spirit we might.
right, I was going to say, but if you are asking, if you're saying, "I need help making this decision." So you're going to him in faith. I know that you can help me. Please help show me the way. Then
You're going to
you
him out of need.
you'll receive an answer generally. If you're asking in faith, not for him to prove himself.
But even then some of the hardest I think trials of our faith that we experience at least I know this was true of me if I
Hmm.
look back. And if people want to buy a book and read Leaves That Blew Away, it's a really
Oh my
good
gosh,
book.
go read Leaves That Blew
It's
Away.
on
So good.
Amazon. Did I talk about Nine Mile Point already? Anyway,
I think you did.
I know.
You did, but Leaves That Blew Away is relevant in this conversation. So,
But I don't know if I would have. There was things that as you write something like that, that you start to maybe have some self-realizations, some epiphanies about your own self. You know what I mean? Or your
hmm.
life, or your journey.
Hmm.
But um, one thing I think is that one thing that can trip people up is like, and this happened, I think, to me. I think that when my mom died, and you pray so hard for healing, you know you have a God that he not only can heal, he does heal,
Right.
but he doesn't heal all the time. and
Right.
and in that spot, it can feel like rejection.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And I think at that
Yes.
point, for me,
Hmm.
it kind of cut my legs out, and I went through the next arguably 10, 12, 15 years kind of struggling. A lot of what I struggled with, I think I felt like God had, I think, let me down.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in a way, it's asking the same thing. It's that God's miracles should be on our at our demand, on our
Oh,
timeline.
yeah, that you
You
felt
know what
that
I
way.
mean?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then if he doesn't, then you know, then everything we thought about him, we start to wonder. Because like if you loved me, surely you would do this, right?
Right. You're right.
I mean, that's how
Well,
we think.
especially a young mind. You were how old?
I was 30. I wasn't that young.
You were 30?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
29.
Still,
30.
well, okay.
29.
Yeah, that's older than I thought. But still, um, yeah, I do think that we think that way. I think that's a very human way of thinking when we're grappling with something difficult and we want what we want from God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really normal process of thought.
I was thinking about the story of Moses,
Hmm.
and I haven't gotten into this. I did Rahab on the last one on my own,
Okay.
but because Moses is kind of big to try to
Hmm.
like wrap your arms around. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But I was thinking about how Moses, he's raised in he's kind of chosen by God, and then he's set out in that little basket, and Pharaoh's daughter picks him up, and then he's raised in Pharaoh's
Right,
court
right.
until he's 40, and then he starts going and back to working with his own people and stuff, the Hebrew slaves and whatever. And there's something in Moses that knows that he's a deliverer, right? And so then what he does is there's a Egyptian slave master that's beating on some Hebrew slave, and Moses kills him and like hides it and covers it up. Well, then he comes back the next day and there's two of his Hebrew brothers or whatever that are fighting. And he's like, "Why are you guys fighting?" And they're like, "What are you going to do? Kill us?" And he's like, "Holy shit, he realized." And
Oh
then
no.
Moses takes off. Moses is in the desert for 40 years, desert of Midian, before God shows up to him again
Okay.
in the burning bush and then calls him. I think what Moses did is he tried to fast forward and force God into his time frame. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so he took it on his own
Hmm.
with this killing this Egyptian. And then when that happened, that failure stayed with him for 40 years. He there was 40 years of working that out in himself to
Hmm.
where he gets to the point and then and surely thinks that it's all over. I mean, he's 80 years old, right? He hasn't
Yeah.
been back to Egypt for 40 years. And then when God finally shows up, it's way too late. Moses is way too old. And he's got all these reasons why God can't do it
Yeah.
because he tried to speed it up. And then we find, but I think that happens to us where we try to force God into something.
Hmm.
And then the result of that is something that kind of sends us adrift into a period of
Right.
wandering for a while.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Sure. And I don't think we feel like
Before he
we're,
can bring us back.
I don't feel like when we do that, I don't feel like we consciously think that we're forcing God into something. I think we just feel like we're just making our decisions in life.
There's something
You
in
know.
us that knows we're born for something,
Hmm.
and yet learning patience and timing,
Right.
that's a real long vision, long
Well,
term deal. You know what I mean?
when we're young, um, we don't realize how long life is,
Yeah,
but we also don't realize how fast it goes, and we're really impatient.
right.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's weird. I know I sounded like I just contradicted myself, but that is what it's like when you're young. You don't realize you got a long way to go, but it also goes really fast. It's like
Yeah.
just take it a day at a time and
I wonder when the soldiers are. I
hmm.
wonder, and I don't know this. I wonder if there's anything to the fact that they kind of dress Jesus up like a king.
Oh yeah, with the
And
purple
then,
robe.
yeah, and then they have this whole ordeal, and then before they're done with that, they put him back in his regular clothes.
Hmm.
And it's almost like, are there times where we or whoever,
Hmm.
where we have a tendency to dress Jesus up into something we claim him to be? Do you know what
Okay.
I mean?
Sure. Yeah, not in a mocking way, just in a self-serving way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or sometimes in a mocking way. There'd be times that the world would dress him up into what they want him to be. So
Oh.
if you listen to Bill Maher represent
Hmm.
Christianity, that's what you're getting.
Okay.
You're getting a made up version. And then
Okay.
he's gonna
Hmm.
make up this whole false version of Jesus, and then he's gonna
Hmm.
beat the shit out of him for a little while.
Okay.
Like just like the soldiers kind of.
Okay.
That's you know what I mean? Like that's what
Sure.
the world does. Like you claim this, we're gonna turn him into this, into a parody of what
Hmm.
Christianity actually is,
You're
and then
right.
we're gonna attack it for a while.
Hmm. Right. Do you watch White Lotus or have you heard anything about
I have not.
White
Nikki
Lotus
does. I
this
know what it
week?
is. No, I haven't heard anything.
So there's a scene this past week, the latest episode that is getting a lot of attention online. It's three friends who haven't been together in a really long time. They're on vacation together, three women. And one of them mentions that they go to church on Sundays, and the other two are just like,
Oh, I did hear something about that. I saw some little thing about what you're
Yes,
saying.
I was going to
That's
say a
all.
lot of people are talking about it because they mock, you know, in their own ways are mocking the idea of this woman being a Christian.
Yeah.
Like one of them's like, "You mean like a Bible thumping church?" Like
Well,
I mean, she's
100%. That's what the world does.
right.
And they're
So
going to
I
bring out the most ridiculous things. They're going to bring
right.
out the snake handlers in the mountains.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yes.
But it's all to dress
Um
up in parody and in mockery.
mhm. So I feel like that's what people who um, are outside, who don't have a relationship with Jesus. So, but you started this conversation with, do we ever dress him up in ways, you
Yeah.
know, that are
Hopefully
so
not to beat him up,
not to beat him
but
up,
but
but
maybe in other ways. Yeah.
I do think we try to manipulate Jesus to be what we want him to be. Well, I think that we do that when we're living in ways that are not in line with what he wants for us.
Yeah.
When we're looking for justification for
That's a
something.
good point. That then we dress up God in some things that we kind of like.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Like,
that's
yeah.
sometimes that's politics. Sometimes we dress him up like a Republican and we convince ourselves that God's on our side.
Right.
Rather than when
Yeah.
Joshua, I said this last week in that Rahab thing,
Okay.
Joshua's getting ready to go to war and he sees all of a sudden the captain of the kingdom of God, the angel or whatever, Jesus maybe a pre-incarnate form thing of Jesus standing there, and
Hmm.
he's got his sword drawn, and Joshua says to him, "Whose side are you on, ours or the enemy's?" And he says, "Neither.
Mm.
I'm God's army." And so there is
Nice.
something to that, right?
Hmm.
As
Yes,
much as
there
we
is.
like to dress him up, and as much as we like to make sure he's
To
got a
claim him
"Make
as our
America
own.
Great Again"
Yeah.
hat on,
Right.
God
Like
usually probably is not quite so
he's
easily
all
pigeonholed.
ours. Right. Yeah. He's like, I'm a little bit bigger than that.
Yeah,
Yeah. I do think when we try to do that, we are limiting him for sure. Narrowing him.
100%.
Yeah. True.
And it won't
So,
last.
so
Eventually,
the
we'll put his own
robe.
clothes back on him and crucify him.
Oh gosh,
Right.
terrible. So, yeah,
So
so I can imagine that them
we did
just,
pretty good today. I don't know. We should probably hang it up. We've been at
yeah,
it a while.
this was good.
I'm
This
not
was
very good at
good.
wrapping things up.
No, it was really
I don't have 3 points.
I thought
I did though today have a
yeah.
list of characters. See,
Oh, very good. Look
I
at you.
just I just wanted to like because they're kind of scattered throughout the different gospels.
You didn't want to
I
miss
wanted to make
one.
sure that in this story we brought them all together because I felt like they all had a role that they played.
Yeah, definitely.
Peter didn't, but maybe Peter was wrong. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I'm glad that you read the excerpt from where was it where he washed his hands? Was that Matthew?
Matthew, yeah.
I'm glad you read that because when we read this, I was like, oh, when I read this today, I was like, oh, he didn't wash his hands. And I remember that so distinctly because years ago, I have a friend now whose church
You
did
have a friend?
I have a
Holy
friend.
shit.
She's still my friend.
Wow.
No, my friend Lori. It's so great. Her church had this really cool, they called it a live Stations of the Cross.
Oh,
And it was set up in their church. They had like a little committee that did it. It was fabulous. And I took the kids, and it was a really powerful thing. But each of these stations, of the cross. So, for example, when Pilate condemns Jesus, the condemnation, the Bible's open there, and you're supposed to read that portion. But there was a basin of water, and you actually washed your hands
oh, that's cool.
when he said that part. And
When
then
you
they had,
said live, I thought you meant
yeah,
like people doing things
no,
in front of you.
like
Oh,
you
oh, oh.
walked through.
I gotcha.
And you prayed at each place and you would like kind of reenact. They
I
had a
honestly don't
giant.
even know what the Stations of the Cross.
Oh, okay, sorry. So they're these key moments.
I've
His
seen them
his
places.
arrest, his arrest, his being condemned, the crown, the
Oh, okay.
crucifixion. It's all of the key moments in the Passion. So, for instance, though, the cross, when he's carrying the cross, they had a giant cross that they built supposedly to the specifications of this. And they had it propped in such a way that you could safely stand under it and just lift it to feel how heavy it was.
Was it heavy?
And oh, yeah, like, my kids
Could
could
you
lift it.
lift
But
it?
I think so, but
Okay.
like I wouldn't have been able to hold it up or
Right.
anything by myself. Um, but it was really cool. And
But
at the
Jesus was a
end,
big, strong carpenter. I mean, truly, I'm not saying that. I mean, like, he was. He probably,
yeah.
they didn't have power
Well,
tools back then. Like, he's a strong guy.
oh,
You know what
true.
I mean?
That's
Like, the,
true.
the, the tools they use, saws, all these things, it's
Right.
all, you'd have to be, it would be,
They'd
it's very
manually
physically
pull in those
intense.
nets full of
Well, if
fish.
you're fish, yeah. But I
Yeah.
think carpentry probably was even more physically intense
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's true.
at that time. You know what I mean? So
So this is now off the subject
Jesus
of
could
Pilate
handle himself, I
washing.
think.
Yeah, I
He
think so.
didn't. He never dealt with people largely that way, other than when he drove the money changers out of the temple. But I think
Yeah.
physically Jesus could handle himself.
He didn't walk around flexing. But
No,
you think he was sporting big biceps under the
I think
robe?
he was strong. I don't know if he was like
Yeah.
like Abe Lincoln strong. Like you wouldn't want to. You know
Right.
what I mean?
He could arm wrestle.
Whatever he looked like, strong. Those kinds of people. You
Right.
know what I mean?
But off the subject of washing the hands, but I remember at the very end of this, they had a cross lying on the floor in this candlelit room. And you earlier had written down like your sins, or maybe you did in there. You wrote down your sins on a piece of paper and you folded it up
How
and
big is
nailed
this
it
piece of paper?
to the cross on the floor. It was
Wow,
really oh yeah, it was super cool. A lot of really neat,
that is
uh,
kind of cool.
yeah, the impressions that it made, it really brought to life that process of what he went through and the reason for it. It was very cool. So they
You
don't do
know,
it anymore, sadly.
no.
No, whoever was in
At the
charge of it
Wesleyan Church in
stopped
town, I've
doing it.
seen them that they have the stations across around,
Okay.
but they're like permanent, like in little glass things. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in every Catholic church, you'll see them on the wall around the perimeter.
Growing up independent Baptist like I did, we shied away from anything that even smelled a little like a Catholic. So we did. I don't even know what the stations of the cross are. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's okay. Sorry. Yeah, that's funny. But
But
no, this was good. Thank you so much for
well, thanks for coming
your
back. My
preparation.
God, everybody's like so happy that Carrie's back.
Yes, did you get lots of fan mail saying, "Where
I
is
got
she?"
hate mail. They said don't ever come back on without Carrie again.
I'll pretend that's true.
No,
Thank you.
the only little bit of, and it wasn't even directly hate mail I got this week was I went
Oh,
out.
did you get something?
Remember our old buddy
Ugh.
Daryl, the old
Mhm.
guy, plays with Lauren. We tried to help
Y-
educate him on the show
Yeah, you went
about
out with him,
Trump.
you said.
Remember? Yeah. So
How'd
anyway, we
it
went out
go?
for a few beers. It was good,
Hmm.
but he actually listens to like the show,
Okay,
and
this one.
yeah, or while they
Hi,
opinion
Daryl.
a news hour or whatever.
Okay.
And when he turns it on, his wife gets mad. She's like, "Are you listening to him again?" She leaves the room. That's
Really?
how much she
Oh,
hates me.
oh no. Even in the Beers with Jesus?
I don't know, I
Oh,
guess.
shoot. Oh, and
Equal opportunity hate mail.
speaking of that, we have a new listener, my cousin Chris
Chris,
in Virginia.
how's it going, Chris? Thank
Hey,
you for
Chris.
listening.
Thanks for listening.
I hope you
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I
said
hope you
he
had
has
some
a,
beers with us while we were doing it.
well, he says he's
That's the
listening.
whole point.
He has a long drive for work, so
Oh,
he's
that's the best time to
hopefully
drink.
on your way to work. On your way to work.
When else do you need a beer than before work?
It's hilarious. Anyway,
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us
thanks,
today. Hit
Todd.
us at the socials.
Mhm.
Share some clips. Share the show. And yeah, help us grow. We enjoy it. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for listening.
And go
Carrie,
check
thanks
out
for being
Todd's
back.
books. And go check out Todd's
Go to
books on
Amazon, get some
Amazon.
books. Go to toddsworld.net and get some gear.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
In fact, I'm supposed to get a new Beers with Jesus sweatshirt.
Where is it?
I don't know. I know I processed it.
Oh, that's right.
For Reese.
It was a birthday present that was not a surprise for you because
I
you
haven't seen her.
processed the
Maybe I'm
order.
supposed to see her this afternoon.
Oh,
She
good.
was
I
gone
hope.
in Indiana
Hmm.
and she's getting married. Did I tell you that? She's getting married and she's like
She got
planning
engaged.
everything.
So exciting.
Getting married soon, October.
Oh, that's cool.
Crazy. You'll probably see some card in the mail. I probably wasn't supposed to tell you.
That's so fun. No, that's great. No, the engagement's not a secret, so it's good. I love
No,
it.
a save the date thing I think is coming.
Perfect.
So,
Perfect. Oh, October.
all right, guys. Thanks for joining us today. We will
Thanks,
catch you
Todd.
next time. Listen to Wildly Opinionated News Hour if you have
See you
not,
soon.
because it's probably the best thing you'll ever hear. And
Besides this.
besides Beers with Jesus, but sounds kind of the same. All right, guys. We'll see you later.